You know that warm feeling you get when you see Made in USA stamped on a motorcycle? That pride in supporting American workers and American manufacturing? I hate to break it to you, but you're getting scammed. And the brutal truth is that most motorcycles marketed as American made are about as American as a fortune cookie. We're talking about bikes where maybe 20% of the actual manufacturing happens in the United States, but they slap that patriotic label on there anyway and charge you a premium for it. Here's what really pisses me off about this whole mess. You're paying extra money because you want to support American jobs and American manufacturing, but the majority of your hard-earned cash is flowing straight to factories in Austria, Japan, China, and a dozen other countries. The American workers, they're mostly just bolting together parts that were made somewhere else. The Federal Trade Commission has rules about what you can call made in USA. But here's the kicker. Those rules have more holes than a screen door. Companies exploit every single one of them. According to the FTC, a product can be labeled made in USA if it's all or virtually all made in America. But what does virtually all actually mean? The FTC doesn't give you a specific percentage. It's basically whatever they can get away with in court. So here's how these motorcycle companies game the system. They import major components like engines, transmissions, and frames from overseas suppliers. Then they have American workers handle what they call final assembly. That means bolting the imported parts together, running quality checks, and shipping the finished bike. A boom, legally made in USA. The math just doesn't work in your favor. Let's say you're looking at a $30,000 touring bike. Maybe $15,000 worth of components came from foreign suppliers. But because American workers spent a few hours putting it all together, the whole thing gets marketed as American made. Here's where it gets really stupid. These companies will import engine blocks that are 90% complete from Austrian foundries. Then they'll do some final machining work in Milwaukee and claim the engine was manufactured in America. They're not lying technically, but they're sure as hell not telling you the whole truth. The worst part is how they structure their supply chains to maximize the appearance of domestic content while minimizing actual American manufacturing. They'll buy Chinese brake pads, mirrors, and electrical components, then package them as genuine American motorcycle parts because an American worker put them in an American box. Even basic stuff like bolts, washers, and gaskets gets imported from China because it's cheaper. We're talking about hardware that any decent American factory could produce. But these companies would rather save a few cents per part and ship the manufacturing jobs overseas. Then there's the whole mess of substantial transformation. This is another legal loophole that lets companies claim domestic origin if they change the product enough during assembly. So they can import a transmission that's completely finished except for the final gear oil, add the oil in America, and call it domestically produced. The bottom line is this. When you see made in USA, on a motorcycle, you're probably looking at a bike where the majority of the actual manufacturing happens somewhere else. You're paying American prices for what's essentially foreign manufacturing with American assembly labor. Let's talk about Harley-Davidson, because they're the poster child for this whole American-made deception. When most people think American motorcycle, they think Harley. But the reality of where your Harley actually comes from might shock you. That iconic Harley engine, the one that's supposed to represent American engineering and manufacturing, it's made by Rotax in Austria. Rotax is owned by BRP, a Canadian company. So the heart of your American motorcycle is actually European. The electronics controlling your fuel injection, ABS, and traction control, Japanese, mostly from suppliers like Bosch and Continental who manufacture those components overseas and ship them to Milwaukee. Even basic stuff like your starter motor, alternator, and ignition components come from international suppliers. Your brake pads, Chinese factories, those chrome mirrors and turn signals, also Chinese, just with American part numbers slapped on them. Even simple stuff like bolts, washers, and rubber gaskets gets imported from China because it's cheaper. Here's how the money flows on your American motorcycle purchase. Let's say you drop $30,000 on a new Harley touring bike. Maybe $8,000 of that goes to the Austrian company that built your engine. Another $3,000 goes to Japanese suppliers for electronics and fuel injection components. $2,000 more goes to various international suppliers for transmission parts, suspension components, and accessories. Then there's another $1,000 worth of basic Chinese components. So out of your $30,000 purchase, maybe $15,000 actually stays in America. The rest flows to foreign suppliers who did the actual manufacturing work. But here's what really gets me fired up about this whole situation. Harley markets these bikes as symbols of American freedom and independence. They charge you a premium because you think you're buying American craftsmanship. But the majority of the craftsmanship happened in factories you've never heard of. in countries that don't care about American workers. The American workers at Harley are skilled, don't get me wrong, but they're essentially highly paid assembly line workers putting together components that were manufactured elsewhere. You're paying American wages for assembly work while subsidizing foreign manufacturing jobs. Now let's look at Indian Motorcycles component sourcing, because they love to play up that America's first motorcycle company angle. They founded in 1901, resurrected by Polaris, and marketed as the patriotic alternative to Harley. But guess what? They're playing the exact same shell game with foreign parts. Indian's engines come from the same playbook as everyone else. Their Thunderstroke engines get manufactured using components from multiple international suppliers. And the engine cases might get cast in one country, machined in another, and assembled in America. But Indian will tell you it's an American-made engine because the final assembly happened in Spirit Lake, Iowa. Here's where it gets really interesting with Indian. They source their smaller displacement engines from completely different suppliers than their big touring bikes. Those Scout engines, different supply chain, different countries of origin for major components, but they all get the same made in USA marketing treatment. The electronics, the package on modern Indians follows the same pattern as Harley. Japanese suppliers for fuel injection, German suppliers for ABS systems, and Chinese manufacturers for basic electrical components. Your Indian's wiring harness, brake pads, mirrors, and dozens of small parts all come from the same overseas factories that supply every other manufacturer. But here's what's really crazy about the Indian situation. Polaris, the parent company, is totally transparent about global sourcing for their other products. Look at their ATVs and snowmobiles. They'll tell you exactly which models are made where. But when it comes to Indian motorcycles, suddenly everything becomes American craftsmanship and heritage manufacturing. The math works out the same way as Harley. You're paying a premium for the Indian badge and the American assembly, but the majority of your money flows to the same international suppliers that build components for every other motorcycle manufacturer. The difference is maybe which specific Austrian foundry cast your engine block or which Japanese company built your fuel injection system. What really gets me is how both companies market against each other using patriotism when they're both buying from the same pool of international suppliers. It's like watching two restaurants fight over who makes the best pizza when they're both buying their dough from the same wholesale supplier. Now, here's where things get really interesting. While Harley and Indian are playing shell games with their supply chains, there's a Chinese company called CFMOTO that's doing something radical. They're being completely honest about where their bikes come from. CFMOTO doesn't pretend to be American. They don't slap patriotic marketing on Chinese manufacturing. They just build decent motorcycles in China, ship them to America, and sell them for what they actually cost to make. No markup for fake patriotism, no premium for imaginary American craftsmanship. Here's what really gets under the skin of the American motorcycle industry. CFMOTO can sell you a 650 cubic centimeter parallel twin adventure bike for $8,000. That same engine displacement and feature set from an American manufacturer, you're looking at $15,000 to $20,000. The difference isn't quality, it's the markup for patriotic marketing. The math is brutal when you compare them side by side. That CFMOTO 650 MT adventure bike has the same basic components as bikes costing twice as much from American brands. Bosch fuel injection, check. ABS braking system, check. Decent suspension components, check. The difference is CFMOTO isn't charging you extra to pretend these parts were assembled by American workers. But here's what's really crazy about the CFMOTO situation. Their bikes are getting better every year while American brands are basically stagnant. CFMOTO is investing in research and development, improving their manufacturing processes, and expanding their model lineup. Meanwhile, Harley is still trying to figure out how to make an electric motorcycle that doesn't suck. The worst part for American brands is that CFMOTO is proving you don't need to lie about manufacturing origin to build a successful motorcycle company. They're transparent about being Chinese, they price their products fairly, and they're gaining market share every year. Here's where it gets really uncomfortable for the American motorcycle industry. CFMOTO uses many of the same suppliers that Harley and Indian use, same Bosch fuel injection systems, same Continental ABS components, same Chinese factories for basic hardware and electrical components. The difference is CFMOTO doesn't pretend these parts magically become American made because they got bolted together in Milwaukee. So when you're paying $30,000 for a made in USA touring bike, you're essentially paying a $20,000 premium for American assembly labor and patriotic marketing. CFMOTO will sell you the same basic transportation with similar components for $10,000, and they won't lie to you about where it came from. The American brands hate this comparison because it exposes their whole business model. They can't compete on price because they're carrying the overhead of American assembly labor plus massive marketing budgets. They can't compete on honesty because their whole brand identity is built on a lie about domestic manufacturing. What's really going to hurt is when CFMOTO starts moving up market. They're already building 800cc and 1000cc bikes that compete directly with American touring motorcycles. Same features, same reliability, half the price, and no nonsense about where the parts actually came from. Look, I get it. You want to buy American, support American workers, and keep manufacturing jobs in the United States. But here's the brutal economic reality that nobody wants to talk about. Manufacturing basic motorcycle components in America would make these bikes so expensive that nobody could afford them. We're not just talking about a small price increase. We're talking about doubling or tripling the cost of major components. Take engine manufacturing. Setting up a modern engine production facility in America would require hundreds of millions of dollars in investment. You need specialized foundries, precision machining equipment, and skilled workers who cost 3 times what their counterparts make in other countries. All of that cost gets passed directly to you. The suppliers these companies use aren't just cheaper, they're often better at what they do. Rotax has been building motorcycle engines for decades. Bosch has perfected fuel injection systems. These companies have invested billions in research, development, and manufacturing capability. Starting from scratch in America would mean reinventing technologies that already exist and work perfectly. Here's the part that really stings. Even if Harley or Indian decided tomorrow to manufacture everything in America, they'd be competing against companies like Honda, Yamaha, and Kawasaki, who have no problem sourcing globally. The American companies would price themselves out of the market within 5 years. But that doesn't mean you have to accept the current deception. The problem isn't that these companies use international suppliers. The problem is that they lie about it and charge you extra for patriotism while sending your money overseas. There's companies like CFMOTO prove you can build quality motorcycles without the deceptive marketing. They're honest about their Chinese manufacturing, they price their products fairly, and they're not trying to scam you with fake patriotism. So what's the answer here? Stop buying American motorcycles entirely? Move to Japan and buy a Honda? Not necessarily. First thing you need to do is stop paying extra for fake patriotism. If you want a Harley or Indian because you love how they ride, how they sound, or how they look, go for it. But don't pay a premium because you think you're supporting American manufacturing when most of the manufacturing happens somewhere else. Second, demand transparency. These companies could easily tell you exactly where each major component comes from. They choose not to because it would hurt their marketing. Start asking dealers specific questions about component sourcing. Make them uncomfortable with the deception. Third, if you really want to support American manufacturing, look for companies that are honest about their supply chains and actually do significant manufacturing work in America. They exist, but they're not the ones spending millions on patriotic marketing campaigns. Or consider this. Maybe it's time to stop paying premiums for fake American manufacturing and just buy honest Chinese motorcycles. CFMOTO will sell you a reliable bike without lying about where it came from. Your money goes to the people who actually built the thing, not to marketing departments and assembly line overhead. The bottom line is this: you're getting lied to, you're paying extra for that lie, and your money is flowing to foreign suppliers regardless of what the marketing tells you. Stop falling for it. Which of these fake American-made motorcycles have you caught yourself considering? Drop a comment and let me know if this changed how you think about motorcycle purchases. And hit subscribe so we can keep exposing the truth about this industry together.